And welcome. Welcome to the Art History Festival 2025. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Christina Bradstreet. I'm the head of programs at the Association for Art History. And today is day two of our festival, celebrating art history and promoting art history. The festival runs right through to Sunday of this week, and we have 130 events taking place both online and in person at venues across the UK. And we have museums and galleries putting on events that showcase art history. This is our fifth year running the festival, which we established because we want more people to know that art history is for everyone. And we want more people to understand that the experiences of art, such as going to exhibitions that many of us enjoy, are curated and delivered by the work and research of art historians. So I'm delighted that we are partnering with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, who oversee Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater, the iconic country house that he designed for the Kaufman family of Pittsburgh, which has actually been named the best all-time work of American architecture by the American Institute of Architects, and it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2019. We have an hour for this event. Our speaker will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. So please do write your questions that you have in the Q&A box. It's helpful if you can write these as you think of them as we go along, so that we have time to prepare. So that just leaves me now to introduce our speaker. Amy Humbert is Manager of Outreach and School Programs at Fallingwater. We're delighted that she's here to give us this talk today at what is in fact a very busy time for them at this point in the year. So welcome, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can, yes.
All right. Thank you. So I have spent the last 40 years of my life here at Fallingwater. It is a wonderful site, and we are quite excited to be able to share a bit of our history. And I will also be talking about Frank Lloyd Wright's ideas about organic architecture. So, with that being said, I will go ahead and get started. I've got a lovely photograph of Fallingwater that you can see now up on the screen. And Fallingwater was a vacation home that belonged to the Kaufman family of Pittsburgh. The Kaufman family, go ahead and advance here. The Kaufmans were made up of Edgar Kaufman Sr., Edgar Kaufman Jr., their one child, and then Lillian Kaufman. And Edgar and Lillian, I'll talk a little bit more about here first. So we'll go on with talking about as well the family business, which all three of them were very much involved in. The Kaufman's department store was located in downtown Pittsburgh. 15 floors and over 1 million square feet of shopping space. It was Pittsburgh's largest department store. It closed as an actual department store in 2015. However, the building is still there, and fortunately, it was saved, remodeled. It is currently being used as apartments, and one section is also a hotel with some retail space on the ground floor. So the building itself does still exist should you ever have the opportunity to visit the city of Pittsburgh. And it was designed by a local architect, Benno Jansen, who was from Pittsburgh. So Edgar Kaufman Sr. was a very dynamic businessman. He was a businessman. He was an active civic leader, and he was a key player in Pittsburgh's Renaissance. He was very passionate about bringing the arts and culture to the city. And in addition to being a civic leader, he also was quite an outdoorsman, enjoying sports such as hiking, fishing, horseback riding. He was born in 1885 and he died in 1955. He had married his first cousin, Lillian, She created the department store's very exclusive Von Dome shop, which was one of the first designer boutiques in an American department store. She also maintained a very active life, in addition to actually managing the Von Dome shop. She also volunteered quite a bit at Pittsburgh Hospital. So she was involved in healthcare in the city, uh, volunteering at Pittsburgh's Mercy Hospital, and also serving as the executive director of the board of Montefiore Hospital in Pittsburgh as well. They had one son, Edgar Kaufman Jr., and his interest in art and design would eventually lead him to a career as a curator and professor of art and architectural history. Fallingwater very much influenced the direction of his career. As a young man in his 20s, he studied painting with the artist Victor Hammer, and he was also an apprentice at Frank Lloyd Wright's school, Taliesin, which was also Frank Lloyd Wright's home. So Edgar Jr. would spend roughly about 6 months as a student with Frank Lloyd Wright in the early 1930s. Edgar Jr. would go on to become an art and architectural historian, and he would become curator of industrial design at the Museum of Modern Art and also an adjunct professor of art and architectural history at Columbia University. And he was born in 1910 and he died in 1989. Edgar Jr. is shown here in this photograph taken at Fallingwater in we don't have an exact year, but it was the late 40s, early 50s. He is shown here with his partner, Paul Mayen, who was an industrial designer. And the lady in the photo is Paul's sister, Flores. And I also wanted to take a moment to showcase the office that Frank Lloyd Wright designed for Edgar Kaufman Sr. And this was located in one of the upper floors of the department store. And the design for this office was happening just about the same time in the mid 1930s as the design for Fallingwater was taking place. Now, after the store changed hands in 1946, Edgar Kaufman Sr. would bring in another company, the May Company, to actually take over the department store business. And Edgar Sr. remained involved in Kaufman's until he died in 1955. After that, the office was dismantled and taken to another building in Pittsburgh where Edgar Jr. would continue to use it for many years up until the early 1970s when it was donated to the Victorian Albert Museum in London. And as I understand, it is currently now on exhibit. It sometimes has been in storage at different times, but it is currently on display. Edgar Jr. very, very briefly entertained the possibility of taking over the Kaufman's department store and continuing in the family business. And he did work there until 1940. And that's when he made the decision to leave, move to New York, and join the staff of the Museum of Modern Art. During World War II, from 1942 to 46, he served in World War II as an intelligence officer, and then he would return to MoMA after the war and become curator of industrial design. He curated a successful series of exhibitions at MoMA called Good Design from 1950 until 1956. These exhibitions included a range of decorative and functional objects such as furniture, lighting, and also textile designs, as well as a fully furnished house in the museum garden. The Good Design exhibitions helped to launch the careers of some major designers, including Charles and Ray Eames, Eero Saarinen, Finn Newell, and Bruno Matheson, to name just a few. And the Kaufmans owned a second very famous house Richard Neutra's Kaufman House in Palm Springs, California, was designed for the family in 1946. The photo I'm showing you right now is a very famous photo taken by the architectural photographer Julius Schulman. This house, the Desert House, was one of the first modernist houses in Palm Springs, and it is credited with defining the modernist aesthetic of this desert town. And this house speaks to the Kaufmans as being tastemakers of modernism, not only in Pittsburgh, but nationally and also internationally as well. Now, in the 1930s, Pittsburgh was known as the Smoky City. Pollution was from the steel mills, which filled the air, and actually caused streetlights to come on some days because the pollution level was so bad and it was so dark that the streetlights were necessary for people just to be able to see to move around. So, of course, I have the photo in on the left taken in the 1930s and showing kind of what the city looked like at that time. It's a triangular shaped city based on the way the rivers flow around the edges. And then in the 40s and 1950s, there was a renaissance in the city. Edgar Kaufman Sr. was a leader involved in that renaissance. And you can see very much how much the city has changed today based on the color photo there on your right. I wanted to take just a moment and give you some idea of exactly where Fallingwater is located with its relationship to Pittsburgh. So, of course, Pittsburgh is, you can see, kind of highlighted there, and Fallingwater is down right in this section. There's a section that comes up through the state that's very, almost looks like fingers have been taken down through the state with like as if like in sand. There's some wrinkles there. This is part of the Appalachian Mountains coming up through Pennsylvania, and Fallingwater is located just to the east of the Appalachian Mountains. You can actually drive from Fallingwater to the edge of the Appalachians probably in about 25 minutes. So we're very, very close. But it is located roughly 60 miles south of Pittsburgh. And we get a lot of questions with people wondering, why in the world would the Kaufmans leave Pittsburgh and come to an area that was very rural, um, very mountainous? Well, the Kaufmans, like many Pittsburghers, were hoping to escape the pollution and go to a part of the state where they could enjoy outdoor, nature related activities, hiking and fishing. And many Pittsburghers had started to take the train from the city. The railroads were built to connect Pittsburgh and the Laurel Highlands south of the city. The Laurel Highlands is the region that I'm actually about to show you here. This is a relatively recent photo. Fallingwater is located where the red dot is, right up in this section of the state there. So we're looking at an aerial photo of the Laurel Highlands. And as I said, it's a recent photo. You can see it is still very underdeveloped. It's a rural area. We have lots of places for hiking and fishing. And Pittsburghers began to kind of flock to the region, probably starting about the 1880s, 1890s. Once the railroads were built to connect this corner of the state, this part of the region was very rich in coal and timber, and they wanted to be able to move those goods up to the city. Well, of course, passenger trains were running as well. And Pittsburghers found that in roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours, they could get on the train, come to the Laurel Highlands, and it was a wonderful place for vacations. So lots of little cabins and hotels and lodges started springing up right around the turn of the early 1900s. So it was not unusual that the Kaufmans would come to the Laurel Highlands and seek an area kind of as a refuge from city life. And what they initially did around 1916 was order a very simple mail order cabin. It's not very big. and it did not have running water, it did not have heat, but it was a great place for them to come on summer weekends and just kind of get away from the city. And that worked pretty well for roughly about 15 years. Now, at this point, we're into the early 1930s. The automobile is becoming very, very popular. And their cabin was actually built right on the edge of a cliff. And just below that screened in porch that you can see was actually the main road coming into the region. When they first built the cabin, that was perfectly fine. However, by the time we get to the early 1930s, that road is paved, and suddenly they're getting a lot of dust and traffic noise up to their cabin. And that's exactly what they're trying to escape from in the city. And so they start to think that, we've got a nice piece of land here. Perhaps we should build something in another location on the site, and maybe we want to think about like having a year round vacation home so that we could come out in the winter with heat and electric. And at this point in the early 1930s, their son, Edgar Kaufman Jr., had gone out to Frank Lloyd Wright's newly established school, the Taliesin Fellowship in Wisconsin. He started the school in 1932. Edgar Jr. applied in 1934. Of course, during that time, the Kaufmans left Pittsburgh, went out to visit at Taliesin, visit their son, and they became exposed to Wright's architecture. Now, by the 1930s, Frank Lloyd Wright was, when the Kaufmans met him, he was roughly about 68 years old. And he had been working as an architect for over 40 years. Fallingwater Falls, somewhere in the middle of his career, there are approximately 200 buildings after Fallingwater. He was almost 92 when he died in 1959. Fallingwater, though, is regarded as Wright's strongest work and one of his best examples of his philosophy of organic architecture. And that's what I want to move into right now. Step away from Fallingwater for a moment and delve a little bit deeper into Wright's ideas. So, Frank Lloyd Wright, sorry, it actually advanced there on me. Frank Lloyd Wright was born June 8th, 1867, in Richland Center, Wisconsin, which is just about 30 minutes from Spring Green, where he would later build his home, Taliesin. His family moved very frequently during his early years. Wright lived in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Iowa before settling in Madison when he was 12 years old. Importantly, he spent his summers with his mother's family in Spring Green. And his mother, Anna Lloyd Jones, was a teacher from a very large Welsh family who had settled in Spring Green. Wright's father, William Carey Wright, was a preacher and a musician. And as a child, Wright fell deeply in love with the Wisconsin landscape he explored as a boy. Later, he would reminisce, saying, the modeling of the hills, the weaving and fabric that clings to them, the look of it all in tender green or covered with snow or in full glow of summer that bursts into the glorious blaze of autumn. I still feel myself as much a part of it as the trees and birds and bees are and the red barns. In 18 Sorry about that. In 1887, after a brief stint at the University of Wisconsin, not quite 20 years old, the young Frank Lloyd Wright would leave Madison to make his way as an architect. He was fortunate that the closest major city was Chicago, and Chicago was becoming an industrial giant. Its population soaring, and it was still in the midst of a major building boom brought on by the devastating 1871 fire that had destroyed the heart of the pre Civil War city. It did not take long for Wright to identify the most progressive architectural firms as those who were applying industrial construction techniques, new technologies to commercial building projects. One on the brink of what would be the most creative commercial design center in the world, he was lucky enough to find that his formative years were spent being employed with first Joseph Lyman Silsby and then later with Dankmar Adler and Louis Sullivan. Wright recalled that I'm so sorry, I'm not quite sure why that's happening. Um, Wright recalled that Silsby's superior talent in design had made him respected in Chicago. Silsby followed the fashion of the day, working in a variety of very eclectic European styles, including high Victorian Gothic, as seen in the Syracuse Bank, which is a blend of the Richardsonian Romanesque and Queen Anne styles seen in the William Warfield House in Quincy, and the classic revival Barber House located in Polo, Illinois. Several of Wright's contemporaries, including architects George Washington Maher and George Elmsley, passed through Silsby's office while Wright was there, and their work would also inform Wright's earliest theories on residential design. An 1886 shingle style chapel designed by Silsby with assistance from his young protege, Frank Lloyd Wright, for Wright's Unitarian minister, Uncle Jenkin Lloyd Jones, would become one of Silsby's most significant works. The ambitious young Wright did not work with Silsby for long. In early 1888, he secured a position with the very prestigious architectural firm of Adler and Sullivan. The partnership produced many of Chicago's earliest tall buildings, and large commercial projects included the famed Auditorium building, which Wright would work on as a draftsman. Sullivan soon recognized Wright's emerging talents, and he made Wright his personal assistant while also mentoring him and helping to shape Wright's philosophic architecture. And that would reflect that Wright's architecture would then reflect both the Midwestern landscape, and it would be suited to the modern American way of life. Now, it's important to note that Wright did not invent organic architecture. It was already in the air as progressive architects like Adler, who was the older of the partnership in Adler and Sullivan, sought to create an architecture very fitting of America. For those in Chicago, it was a time of opportunity and optimism. The idea of a very uniquely American style of architecture is something that Frank Lloyd Wright considered, and he would work on this idea for his entire career. And he wrote prolifically about it in his later years. The auditorium building and other landmarks utilized new methods of steel frame construction and a very uniquely American blend of both Art Nouveau decoration with a simplified um, monumentality. Wright took Sullivan's ideas to heart, and we hear them echoed in, I'm so sorry, Wright. I'm not sure why it is wanting to advance on me. Okay. Wright would take Sullivan's ideas to heart, and we hear them echoed in his own writings over the course of his 70-plus-year career. Like Sullivan, nature and an architecture befitting of America were central to his architectural philosophy. He also considered harmony with nature to be a modern ideal, and an essential precedent to set for the future of American architecture and society in general. Though through design, Wright felt that architecture could highlight and showcase the beauty of the American landscape. Over the course of Wright's career, he would design over 1,000 buildings, of which 532 were realized and approximately 420 remain. But he was also a teacher and a very prolific writer, which I mentioned. Although his language was often somewhat ambiguous, there are a handful of principles that he continued to refine and clarify that have come to define his design philosophy. Underlying these principles were two core beliefs. The first was an understanding of nature. While Wright was often ambiguous, a very careful study of his philosophy reveals these two beliefs and the five principles: nature as the foundation of architectural design, a very deep love of America and belief that it deserved an architecture, and then the principles of form, individuality, setting. And then let's talk a little bit more about nature in general, because that can be a bit misstrued about exactly what Wright was referring to. For Wright, nature was the spiritual and creative foundation for all architectural expression. It is important to note, however, that his use of the word nature did not necessarily equate with landscape. Instead, it had various meanings, and frequently it refers to something greater than the land and its plant forms. It was a spiritual force, a cosmic symphony in which humans, like the plants and animals, played a vital part. It was also seen as the essential quality of something, as in the nature of something. Importantly, we find he often used these meanings interchangeably. So one has to look carefully at the context in his writing to understand his exact meaning. Lastly, the role of architect he felt was not to imitate nature directly, but instead to respond to nature, translating it to be an honest, abstract form. Wright's second core belief came out of his passionate love of America and his belief that America deserved an architecture of its own instead of the very eclectic display of European inspired faux manor houses, chateaus, castles, and Queen Anne cottages that lined the streets of American cities. Instead, he called for an architecture for my American people, one that would be a tangible expression of the ideals of democracy, honesty, freedom, and individuality, and be inspired by the vast and varied American landscape. He said, without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization. One of these core beliefs, out of these core beliefs, came several principles that addressed the handling of form, style, setting, materials, and spirit. The first is form. In his autobiography of an idea, Sullivan wrote, "Form ever follows function." And that often is misquoted as form follows function. Wright took the concept one step further, writing, "Form and function are one." This is analogous to biological growth. The way that form of forms of plants and animals evolve based on function. So this principle requires a building's form to be an outgrowth of a very careful study of the specific requirements of program and site. This precept led to the reduction of interior walls and the opening of space to incorporate multiple functions, which until this time were in separate rooms. Wright's first distinct style, the Prairie House, very deliberately blurred the distinction between interior space and the surrounding terrain. Prairie houses were characterized by very low horizontal lines that were meant to blend with the flat landscape around them. Typically, these structures were built around a central chimney and consisted of broad open spaces instead of strictly defined rooms. The Ward Willets House in Highland Park, which is actually what's up on the screen currently, was the first house that embodied all of the elements of prairie style. Its cross axial plan was a radical departure from traditional domestic architecture. The three wings with windows or glass doors on the three sides reach out into nature, connecting the occupant with the landscape around them. And the central core, with its fireplace, imparts a new importance to the fireplace as the very symbolic heart of the home. And perhaps the very best known example of Prairie House, Chicago's Roby House, we see the idea that nature was not to be imitated, but rather studied and simplified, in this case through geometric abstraction. The natural setting is only obliquely referenced by the dramatic broad and hovering low pitched roof and long band of horizontal windows that were designed to be an abstract reference to the larger regional prairie landscape. In the floor plan, we see how many interior walls are eliminated to open the space to incorporate multiple functions. It is the birth of the open plan. The single feature of the Roby House, this single feature, the idea of the open plan, would change domestic architecture forever. The Roby House is located in an urban setting. So Wright has elevated the living space to provide privacy from the street. So the main living area is actually on the second floor. So if you were standing inside, you are looking out and down to street level, meaning that passersby on the sidewalk cannot look up inside the house, offering a great deal of privacy from the street. Wright designed art glass windows that resemble nature in a very limited color palette. And these windows provide dappled light, similar almost to the way light comes through the leaves of a tree. The art glass panel doors open out onto a terrace, which allows you then, a lovely view looking out and down to the street. The glass doors help to unite the living and also the dining area, which is on the opposite end of the fireplace. And then we also have a very long, extraordinary cantilever, which is a section of the building that does not have vertical space or vertical support, I'm sorry, underneath of it then. The Jacobs House in Madison, Wisconsin was the very first of Wright's Usonian designs. And I think it's interesting to note that the Jacobs House, which you're viewing now, was actually under construction at the same time as Fallingwater, 1936. It was designed for a moderate income family of four and employs a very simple palette of materials, both on the interior and the exterior. Basically, just four materials: wood, brick, concrete, and glass. The wood gives the house a wonderful sense of warmth, and you have full length glass doors that connect it to the garden, which once again blurs the separation between interior and exterior space. Also, under construction in 1936, we have the S.C. Johnson Wax Administration Building. In other situations, Wright would turn things inside out. For example, at S.C. Johnson Building in Racine, he turned the building focus inward, away from the surrounding industrial environment to create its own internal landscape, a forest of columns reaching up into its own seemingly infinite sky, wrapping the occupants in a man made environment that is as satisfying as a natural environment in terms of its continuity, simplicity, unity, and beauty. Finally, Wright believed the formal arrangement of a building's interior spaces should be expressed in its exterior form. It's the idea that form and function are one. And no better example of this idea can be found than in the extraordinary Guggenheim Museum in New York, which has its interior circular ramp, and it's readily seen also in that exterior form. Like the countless species of flora, each occupying a specific niche based on its function within a specific environment, individuality is also an essential characteristic of organic architecture. But individuality, as expressed in Wright's work, not only includes variety based on client, program, and setting, it is tied to the American ideal of individual freedom. Wright wrote, there should be as many kinds or styles of houses as there are kinds or styles of people, and as many differentiations as there are different individuals. Likewise, he connected style to geographic location and earlier traditions of the region. Here at the Hollyhock House, with its temple like form, and it's located in Southern California, he turned to ancient pre Columbian architecture as a source of inspiration. However, behind its monumental facade, the building opens to a very large courtyard reminiscent of earlier Spanish colonial traditions. And it's very modern and connecting indoor living and outdoor living. It is in Wright's own homes that we see some of his most complex experiments in organic architecture. Here at his home Taliesin in Spring Green, Wisconsin, which is located in a beautiful pastoral landscape, the building both hugs and crowns its hillside setting, becoming part of the hill as it fully integrates building and site in the way that it follows the contour of the hill and seems to grow from it. In contrast, Wright's approach is the same for his winter home, Taliesin West, in Scottsdale, Arizona. Again, he turns to the landscape for inspiration. The building's strong geometric forms echo the surrounding mountains. Likewise, the overall site plan with its series of twisting and turning pathways and open spaces, all of which are integrated into the structure. The masonry used at Taliesin West is called desert rubble masonry. It was developed for Taliesin West, and it further helps to tie the building to its setting, as does the very extensive use of native plants and water features, making this site as much a work of landscape design as architecture. Creating buildings with spiritual force was always important to Wright. At Unity Temple in Oak Park, Illinois, the spiritual, the feeling one experiences when visiting the building is immediate and visceral. Its monumental, abstract, geometric forms create a self contained religious space lit from above that very much envelops and lifts you. Wright uses the term spirit less literally, meaning the overall aesthetic spirit or the ways in which one can be moved by an aesthetic experience. So now that we're familiar with Wright's work and philosophy, let's travel back to the year 1934. And that is the year that Frank Lloyd Wright received the commission for a vacation home for the Kaufman family. And that commission came with the following criteria. Family wanted a house near their favorite spot, the waterfall. They wanted a house with lots of outdoor living space, year round use with running water and heat, modern in character, but nothing too formal. Kind of thinking about a rustic elegance. And note the natural cantilever under the waterfall. So, again, a cantilever is a section of a building, or it can be something in nature. In this case, that rock ledge extending out, not having vertical support under it. And then, if you look at the photo of Fallingwater to the right, hopefully you can see how Wright took that idea of the cantilever and used that as the main building component in designing Fallingwater. Organic architecture is the idea that a house should fit into its surroundings. And I think Fallingwater is certainly one of the best examples of that. It's not a building that you can picture being located anywhere else. It is very much of and inspired by its site. Construction began in the spring of 1936 with local labor, and it lasted for roughly about a year and a half. The main house was finished in mid 1937, and then a guest house was added in 1939. Concrete was mixed on site in small gasoline hand mixers, so no large concrete trucks and pumpers, just small gasoline mixers that the men emptied either into wooden chutes or into wheelbarrows and then dumped the concrete. And they poured the concrete over steel reinforcing rods into wooden forms. And you can see in these photographs some of the wooden scaffolding, the formwork has been removed in these early photos. Also, the photo at the bottom is a photograph of Edgar Kaufman standing below the falls while the scaffolding is still up for the building. Once the formwork was stripped away, then a stucco coat was applied. Um, this photo, the top photo that you're looking at, shows the construction of the four foundation bolsters on top of the bedrock of the falls. Three of those are concrete, and then the one on the far left is a stone wall. Those bolsters are roughly about 10 feet tall, so they raise the first floor about 10 feet above the top of the waterfall. The Pottsville sandstone that it was used for walls and also for floors was quarried just about 500 feet from the waterfall. So it was actually all quarried on site. And you can actually see an example of the stone being used here, not only for flooring. This is a shot of the largest space in the building, which is the first floor, laid out in an open plan design, which accommodates seating areas. Also, there is a dining room on the first level as well. So, this is one gigantic space for the family to be able to entertain and gather in. They talked about how it certainly accommodated large crowds, but it was not an overwhelming space when it was just the family, that there were areas where they could gather and have intimate conversations and not feel at all overwhelmed by the space. You can also see how very connected the building is to nature. Glass wraps around three sides of that space. This first floor out of the three in the main house is the biggest space. And that makes sense. This is the public space where Wright envisioned the family gathering together. If they were going to be inside, this is likely where he expected they would be. In contrast, the bedrooms upstairs are not huge. In comparison to the first level, they're rather small, but each one is set up as an independent suite. Each bedroom has its own large outdoor terrace and also its own private bath. And I think Wright's thinking was that the family would just be retreating to those bedrooms at night to rest and relax, but that during the day, they would either be gathering together as a family, as they had expressed being something they wanted to do, or they would be outside, either walking the grounds or sunbathing, maybe on one of the many outdoor terraces. Wright's design became world famous almost instantaneously. Here, Fallingwater is featured on the cover of Time magazine in 1938 before construction was even complete. Also, that same year in 1938, the Museum of Modern Art would mount a solo exhibit focusing on Fallingwater, which was a rather unusual move for them to focus on just one building in an exhibit. So, Fallingwater gained worldwide attention very, very quickly. Two generations of the Kaufman family enjoyed Fallingwater. First, Edgar Sr., Lillian, and Edgar Jr. until the mid 1950s when both parents passed away. And then Edgar Jr. and his partner Paul enjoyed the house until 1963, which is when Edgar Jr. entrusted Fallingwater to a private land conservation group, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, which was based out of Pittsburgh. The family had discussed the future of Fallingwater and possibly of making it available to the public before the parents passed away. But the decision to entrust a historic house to a land conservation organization was unusual. However, Edgar Sr. had become involved in the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy in the 1930s when the organization spearheaded an effort to preserve a local peninsula. Um, and local, the peninsula was located roughly 10 minutes from Fallingwater. And Edgar Kaufman Sr. had been asked to provide some of the funding to help purchase and then conserve that peninsula of land, which contained an unusual amount of species of plants. So that was kind of the Kaufman's first involvement with the conservancy. Um, Also, Edgar Jr. was of the mindset that preserving Fallingwater's landscape was essential, and it was of equal importance to preserving the house itself. Fallingwater officially opened for tours in 1964. It is part of a serial nomination, a collective World Heritage Site throughout the U.S. that includes 8 Wright design buildings that were selected to showcase and highlight the phases and achievement of Wright's career. And my final slide actually the this slide is listing those 8 sites that are located here in the U.S. So we are not a singular World Heritage Site. It's actually a serial nomination of 8 buildings, of which Fallingwater is a part of. So I hope you very much enjoyed my presentation. I am certainly happy to take questions. So I will turn it back over to Christina and we'll start the Q&A.
Got quite a lot of questions. Actually, they're coming in thick and fast now, I think. So we'll just get through as many as we can, I guess, in the next 10 minutes. Um, there's some questions about his clients, what kind of relationship he built with them, what did he learn or know about his clients, how did that impact the architecture, and how much of the input was from the clients versus his own design, language, and philosophy, for Fallingwater, but other works as well.
Well, I can certainly speak for Fallingwater. There was quite a bit of give and take with the Kaufman family. That doesn't mean that Wright did not sometimes refuse ideas. That also doesn't mean that the Kaufmans didn't get anything they wanted. I think there was a great deal of respect between Frank Lloyd Wright and Edgar Kaufman Sr. Edgar Kaufman was not a man used to being pushed around in business, and he was not about to let that happen in this home. And I think Frank Lloyd Wright very much respected that. I think it depended on how much Wright felt the clients understood what he felt was best for them. That doesn't mean that he always got his own way, but there is certainly quite a bit that is written about that because those are the things that people like to talk about and like to remember. But Wright did very much want input from his clients. He wanted to know their lifestyle, he wanted to know what their expectations were. But yes, sometimes he did feel that he knew better than they did what was going to be best for them.
Thank you. There's a question from Josephine, about whether harmony with nature for Frank Lloyd Wright just meant in terms of kind of visual design and beauty, or is there kind of evidence of thinking about limiting the harm to the local environment, the ecosystem?
We do get some responses, wondering how much the building is impacting the site, the stream, and if Wright were alive today, would he make the same decisions? Which is, I think, difficult to guess. Um, I think in Fallingwater, Wright felt that he wanted to connect the Kaufmans to nature and that his ultimate goal was to create a building in which they were living with a waterfall as opposed to being separate from it and looking at it. They had initially expected that the house might be across the stream and they would be looking across at the falls. And Wright felt that to build the building separately from the falls was going to take some of um, they might get kind of used to the view and would not appreciate it as long. And he felt that aesthetic experience of living with the waterfall was so important that I think that was his ultimate goal, despite you know what might happen with changes in the ecosystem. Today there are setbacks, and here in the U.S. regarding how close you can build to a body of water, so it wouldn't be possible today to build a house similar to Fallingwater right in a stream. But I think he was responding to what he felt was the most important thing for this family, and he wanted to give them the experience of living with the waterfall, and the aesthetic was what was most important.
Thank you. There's also a question about the what the prairie metaphor sort of meant to Frank Lloyd Wright. The person is saying it looks like it promotes separation from wider community, and is very concerned with privacy. Um,
Well,
that's
the
something you can expand
prairie
upon.
idea came from the like long, expansive, open plains in the Midwest, which were still somewhat in existence when Wright was a young boy in Wisconsin. And so when he talks about prairie houses, that's kind of what he's thinking back to, creating these long, low horizontal lines. Many of those early clients who contacted Wright and wanted one of these prairie houses were kind of upper middle class, and they were very much interested in the idea of privacy and preservation of the family unit, and kind of, keeping the outside a little bit at bay, not totally separating a person from it. You're When you're inside up in that refuge space up on the second level, you're still quite close to what's happening around you outside in the outside community, but there's just enough separation that you can kind of be in the community and still have equal amounts of privacy as well. So I think the people that commission these types of buildings, privacy was something that they were very much concerned about, and that idea appealed to them. um, I hope that I hope that speaks to your question.
Definitely, perfectly. Thank you. A technical question here. How was the cantilevered balcony first floor supported? It looks as if it has no support.
It does not have vertical support, so there is no column under the entire first level of the building. The first level, I showed the slide earlier that showed the foundation bolsters. From the point at which those stop, the building extends 15 feet out from the bolsters. That first level is concrete that's poured over steel reinforcing rods, and those rods curve up into the first floor balconies. And when you build a cantilever, you've got to have a material that's very stiff and rigid. So, a lot of times when I talk to kids, I'll tell them you could actually build one at your desk, but you've got to use something hard, rigid, like, say, a hardback book. And if you slide it out over the edge of a desk just till it's about to tip, and then add weight on the back. So, in this case, my hand pressing down on the back, that's going to weight the back down and balance the front up. It would not work with a flimsy material like paper. The cantilever would not work, but it also would not work if there was not the counterweight. At Fallingwater, that counterbalance or fulcrum is our chimney. So that masonry section that is the tallest part of the building, that you see kind of there on the far left side, it goes 31 feet up through the building. Um, and I apologize. I didn't think about converting everything to metric. I should have done that. But that chimney is the tallest part of the building. That is the counterweight on the back of the first floor to balance the front of it up. There are no steel girders in this house. Wright had built cantilevers previously. He had built them at the Roby House, which was way back in like 1910. But he believed in the idea of reinforced concrete, that with reinforced concrete, you were just using steel reinforcing rods. You could span larger areas without the weight of an I beam. And that's true, but you've got to put enough steel reinforcement in. And Fallingwater has had challenges with that. The building did not have quite enough steel reinforcement. It pushed the limits so far beyond what construction methods were extremely familiar with. And so, 20 years ago, we actually went inside the first floor by taking up the stone floor of the living room and installing steel girders on the inside. I'm sorry, steel, um, high strength steel cables. I forgot my word. Steel cables. So we post tensioned that first floor. And by putting the post tension cables in there, we could stiffen and add strength to that cantilever so that it would not continue to sag downward, which is what was happening because it wasn't stiff or rigid enough. It did not initially have enough steel reinforcing rods.
Amazing. I can tell you that you've had to give these kind of explanations before. It's very well done.
Thank you.
Well, we're coming up to the end now. What's your favorite season at Falling Water? And what's the best time for people to visit?
That's hard because each season brings out different light in the building. Um, I think maybe my favorite might be fall. You know, I like seeing the changing of the leaves, but I've also been in the building during blizzard-like conditions, and that's really
Mm.
interesting, to see the snow coming down around. Rainy days are interesting too. The photograph that was taken here by Andrew Peelage in 2019, I was with Andrew the day that he took this photo. It was in July. It was incredibly hot and humid. It had been raining hard, and he had taken a photography class down to the point where we take those classic images. And for a brief moment, the sun came out, and he was able to capture that image with like the house kind of located in the mist. But I think for me, if I had to choose just one, it would probably be fall.
Thank you so much. And now is the time to go. Um,
Yes. Get your reservation far in advance. It's also our busiest.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was fascinating. And I know that we've actually got some teachers who've joined us with us today, who will no doubt be sharing this with their students as well. Thank you
That's
so much.
wonderful to hear. And we do offer virtual field trips. So if any of you are interested in having something similar, just focusing on just falling water, I we offer that for the classroom. So please feel free to reach out to me.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you everyone for joining us. Do check out our program for the Art History Festival. We've got lots more coming up for the rest of this week. If anyone's in London tomorrow evening, we've got an in-person event at our headquarters in Farringdon, in Calcross Street in London. We've got an evening of talks and events there with contemporary artists. And you can find that on the festival website, or I think I can put the link in here now. It's called Creative Resistance. Um, so I hope to see some of you there as well. And also this evening, we've got another event coming up shortly with the Chief Executive of Art UK. He's going to be talking about all of the initiatives and recent developments with that organisation. So that should be really interesting. Yeah, check out the festival website and you'll find all the details there.